The night had fallen, and the streets were deserted and silent. In a small town, going out at night took courage because everyone was talking about a rumor a mysterious killer was wandering the streets. No one knew who he was or where he came from, but those who crossed paths with him were never the same again. That night, the town's streets were dimly lit by faint streetlights. The wind gently swayed the tree branches, and dry leaves rustled across the ground. A child's bicycle lay abandoned in the middle of the road. No one knew why it was there, but one thing was certain: something was going to happen that night. The killer was wearing a black cloak, his face hidden in the darkness. The rusty knife in his hand glinted under the streetlight. He moved silently, blending into the shadows. Everyone had retreated to their homes, locking their doors, but the killer had his eye on one particular house. It was the only house on the street with a light on. Inside, a young girl was watching television. Her parents had not yet returned home. She felt a bit uneasy being alone, but she tried to be brave. The sound of the TV echoed through the house, drowning out the eerie silence outside. The killer circled the house cautiously, taking careful steps. He peered through the windows and saw the young girl. Slowly, without making a sound, he moved towards the back door of the house. His grip tightened on the knife, his heart beating steadily. He approached the door, gently placing his hand on the doorknob, and quietly pushed it open. The door creaked slightly as it opened. The girl was so engrossed in the TV that she didn't notice someone was inside the house. The killer slipped inside, disappearing into the shadows as he crept towards the living room. The TV light illuminated the killer's cloak, but left his face hidden in darkness. The girl shivered for a moment, feeling as if someone was watching her, but she didn't dare look back. The girl was so engrossed in the TV that she didn't notice someone was inside the house. The killer slipped inside, disappearing into the shadows as he crept towards the living room. The TV light illuminated the killer's cloak, but left his face hidden in darkness. The girl shivered for a moment, feeling as if someone was watching her, but she didn't dare look back. The killer paused as he watched the girl. Then, he quickened his pace, closing in behind her. The girl sensed movement behind her, but it was too late. The killer swiftly raised the knife and brought it down. The girl collapsed to the floor before she could even scream. The TV continued to play, its sound echoing through the room. After finishing his grim task, the killer calmly looked around the house. Taking care not to leave any evidence, he quietly exited the house just as he had entered. The wind was still blowing, the trees whispering. The killer walked down the street, blending into the darkness, never to be seen again. The next morning, the town was in an uproar. The lifeless body of the young girl had been found, and the townspeople were gripped with fear and horror. Everyone wondered who could have committed such a terrible crime, but no one had any answers. Meanwhile, the killer had already moved on, seeking his next prey. As the killer continued through the dark streets, he made his way towards one of the oldest and largest houses in the town. This house had appeared abandoned for years. Its doors and windows were boarded up, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. But tonight, it would be the perfect hiding place for the killer. When he entered the house, he was greeted by dim light and dusty air. Old furniture was covered in cobwebs, and the floors creaked with every step. The killer retreated to the most hidden corner of the house and decided to stay there until morning. As the night wore on, strange things were happening in another house in the town. A young couple, who had recently moved in, were having a restless night. The woman, looking out the window, noticed shadows moving on the street. The man, meanwhile, kept hearing strange noises inside the house. They felt that something was wrong but couldn't figure out what. At midnight, the couple's house suddenly lost power. The entire house was plunged into darkness. In a panic, they searched for their flashlights and began checking every corner, but they found nothing. Then, they heard a noise coming from the backyard. The man bravely decided to go outside and check. He took his flashlight and went into the yard, where he saw something move among the shadows. Fearfully, he quickened his pace, but suddenly he felt a hand behind him. When he turned around, he saw his wife standing there, but her face was pale with fear and her hand was trembling. "We need to go back inside," she said, her voice shaking. "There's something out here. Someone is watching us." The man took his wife's hand and led her back inside. They locked the doors and closed the curtains. But even inside, they didn't feel safe. As the hours passed, the noises outside grew louder. The house was enveloped in the howling wind and mysterious sounds. Finally, morning came. The killer emerged from his hiding place in the abandoned house and quietly left the town. The events of that night left a deep scar in the town's memory. No one ever discovered who the killer was or where he had come from, but everyone feared that he would return. The town was never peaceful again,